It's been more than 2 years since the day I unboxed my first Mac. Within that time, I've discovered how truly great macOS really is and have adapted my entire workflow to use the best free video editing software ever. Ever since I've embraced the Apple ecosystem, I've finally understood why people are willing to pay the higher prices Apple demands. However, for the past 2 years, one category in particular has been a colossal problem with getting things done. This one product in particular has been ruining my experience with the best operating system in the world, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is my 2011 MacBook Pro. I've realized that, you know what, I've never actually made a video actually reviewing the MacBook at all. I've never really talked about it that much other than a few of its issues before, but I've never done a video unboxing of it. I've never done an actual review of it, a performance test. I've done nothing essentially with this MacBook Pro other than edit videos on it and maybe use it in a few challenges. Today, that's going to be changing, and it's been 2 years. It's been a little more than 2 years since I've unboxed this, and for the most part, I've been editing the majority of my videos on this laptop. I did switch to editing on my iMac after I got that for a while, but eventually it started having some problems, which drove me back to the MacBook, only to remind me what my MacBook problems were in the first place. So, you know what? Today is going to be the official review. So, let's get into it. Okay, so yeah, you may have realized in the title, I have titled this video as a bit of a rant, and that's because, yeah, there are a lot of disappointing things of it, but here's a few disclaimers that I need to address. I originally bought this MacBook because I was doing everything in my power to get away from Windows, because Windows 7 was losing support, and I did not want to update to the very horrible, unstable, unreliable, every bad adjective you can think of operating system that was Windows 10. I was not going to upgrade to that, so I had to switch systems. However, my budget at the time was about $400. Was this $400 worth $400 back then? I'll give you a hint. No, I actually got scammed. More on that later. But that at least allowed me to get away from the world's worst operating system, and I eventually switched to the world's best operating system, macOS. It's not the latest version, but any problem that I mention, even if it's a software problem, they're all related. All of these problems exist because of hardware issues. Any software problems as well. If there are any software problems, which I do have a few of, they are all related to the hardware that the software is running on. So let's actually talk about this. So with some reviews, they like to talk about the exterior and such and all that. Well, you know what? I'm actually going to start with my biggest complaint of all, which has the most downsides I've ever seen. It's the display. I hate everything about this display. It is too small, 13 inches. I am sorry. I do not understand how people have been able to use the 12-inch MacBook or the 11-inch MacBook Air. How do people use that thing? I can't even imagine it. Display size, it's already too small. My next issue with it is the bezels, and it's not because I like white bezels over black bezels. Yeah, I know, I'm a bit weird in that way. But actually, it's because of the thickness of these bezels. These bezels are chonk. So chonk, in fact, that it actually makes the screen look a lot smaller than it already is, which is not really helping its case. Okay, so another issue I have with the display is the resolution, and I originally tried to order a 2013 Retina MacBook Pro with the Retina display, you know, the display where it's nearly impossible to count pixels. I can count pixels on this thing. My vision sucks, and I can still count pixels on this thing. Why is that possible? I mean, at the time, yeah, was it 2007 these things came out? 2007 or 2008. At the time, sure, this may have been the best resolution you can get on a display size like this, but by today's standards, this is just garbage. I also have another issue with it. It's not as major because I don't exactly use my laptop outside that much, but when I have used this laptop outside, the display isn't very bright. But even when I'm working in a bright room, not even outside, just in a bright room like my living room, for example, that room is so bright, I have to turn my display brightness up so high just to see it. Well, I don't know if you know this, but display brightness, whenever you increase it, it's not increasing the power consumption linearly. It's actually increasing power consumption exponentially. So there are so many things about this display that I just do not like. I didn't discover this isn't even a color accurate display. How do I know this? I ran a quick video test. That Apple didn't originally design it as a video test, but evidently I've turned it into one. They've made their wonderful tools ad that I've downloaded, and I played it on so many different displays. I've played it on my 21-inch monitor right here, and when it gets to the Apple TV icon they designed in that part of the video, you can still see Apple TV Plus. You can still read that. It's in a different shade of black, but you can still read Apple TV. You can still see the colors, that's my point. You can still read it. However, on this display, you can't. I've tried so hard, but you cannot read Apple TV on the Apple TV box with this display, which means it's not even that color accurate. Who knew that that one video ad actually made a great test to test color accuracy? And clearly, this thing did not do a good job with those black levels, because that is not good. Now, this thing doesn't get it either, because no, my iMac doesn't get that either, but still, this is a very bad display panel. This has to be the worst display I've ever seen on a laptop. Not only is it small, but the resolution on it sucks, and thick bezels like this, I mean, I've seen laptops with even thicker bezels, but this is a terrible display. So that's my issues with the display, and having a bad display like this is not a good thing, because the display is what we use to interpret what the computer is thinking. Without the display, we don't know if the computer's functioning or not. We need some way for the computer to tell us what it is it's doing. So without a good display, if you're trying to basically tell if the computer's on or off, sure, this display is good. But if you're doing any work, like color correcting or something, I don't do color correcting in my videos, but I'm sure I will at some point. Let me tell you, that is not a good display to be doing it on. All right, so enough about the displays, because yeah, I've already addressed, yeah, it's a terrible display, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I hate it. There's a few other reasons why I hate it as well, and it involves a lot of the exterior stuff as well. I'll do this form factor. Let's first address the I/O. We got MagSafe. Now, the problem isn't actually the port itself, and even though, yeah, it's now an older standard than finding cables for it are actually difficult, here comes the problem. The MagSafe cable design that Apple shipped in the box with this thing, I don't have it anymore, and that's because it actually ripped. Yeah, the cable ripped. But that's not the worst part. If your MagSafe cable rips, not only is your cord useless, but also the brick. The cable is physically attached to the brick. Oh, is it a nightmare when it comes to having to look for a new one? Because no, you can't just swap the cables out and all that. You have to buy a new cable and a new brick, and you want to know how much that costs for the cheapest MagSafe cable on this thing? It's $80. $80 for a charging cable. What do we pay for? I don't know, our phones and such? We can pay like $5, $10 for a charging cable for our phones. And that's because they are detachable from their power bricks, but not this one. Because it is not detachable from the power brick, when you have to replace it, and I had to replace my cable because it ripped. It's $80. I am so grateful that when they brought MagSafe back, they made the cable detachable from the brick. Thank you, because the previous design, that was bad design. It's really bad. There's also an Ethernet port on this, and you know what? I'm actually not going to complain, because I've regularly used this Ethernet port. At my part-time job, I have quite a very weird internet situation. That's because, for the most part, I don't actually have wireless internet access there. I do have wired internet access, and the way I actually do it is I plug an Ethernet cable into my MacBook and then use internet sharing. Yes, that is a function that I'm surprised this thing can actually do. I use internet sharing to basically turn my MacBook into a Wi-Fi router for all of my other devices, and that's how I get internet when I'm at the office. Really nice! And my boss is actually very jealous because he's actually struggling to make a good internet setup, and that's because his cellular is not exactly the best out in the workshop. So yeah, I'm not going to complain about the Ethernet port, even though for the most part, most people can't even use it, and that is something I'm going to miss when I actually get an upgrade, when I actually do get the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So I actually will be buying a dongle for that. That will be the one dongle I'll actually be buying for the MacBook. That's it. And I did search it up. I have not found a single, out of all cables that have switched to have Type-C on one end and some other standard on the other, I have not found a single cable that has Type-C on one end and Ethernet on the other. I have not found one of those cables yet, if they even exist. So yeah, the Ethernet port, I actually like that. The rest, I have a lot of complaints about. First of all, the FireWire port. It's useless. It's a useless hole in the side of my laptop. I don't use it because nothing uses FireWire anymore. The next one, mini display. This has really been a weird one for me. So it's technically a Thunderbolt port because there's the Thunderbolt icon located on the side of it, but for the most part, it's a mini display. And the reason why I treat it as a mini display is because whenever I use that port, I'm just using it for displays. I have no idea if you can can use other Thunderbolt functionality like drives and such, because it is technically a Thunderbolt port. It's got the Thunderbolt icon right next to it. For the most part, because this is actually taking the same form as a mini display, my guess is original Thunderbolt was a display standard or something. I don't know. I don't know why original Thunderbolt was in the same shape as a mini display, because I'm not joking, it actually was the same shape as a mini display. So for the most part, I actually just refer to it as the mini display port, even though it's technically a Thunderbolt port. I just call it the mini display port, and that's because I'm literally using it just for displays. It's not exactly the most useful either, because I've had to buy an adapter to plug it into any display I can think of. I have yet to find a display where somebody was actually smart enough to use an HDMI cable to USB-C. These things exist, people. You don't need USB-C to HDMI adapters. You just need a cable with HDMI on one end and Type-C on the other. Anywho, I have yet to find people who are smart enough to actually do that, and because of that, I need a dongle anyways. Oh, and by the way, nobody uses a mini display port. Nobody. I have yet to find a single person who actually uses the mini display port. So, had to get an adapter anyways. Ugh. Beside that are two USB-As, and while you really should be saying, you can't complain about them using USB-As because this came out in 2011. USB-C wasn't invented yet. Okay, fine. That doesn't change the fact I actually still have problems. I mean, USB-A, I'm not going to actually talk about how it was poorly designed. I'm actually going to talk about how Apple screwed up including these USB-A ports. These ports are too close together. You're probably confused. Let me explain. So, something that I've used to do with this MacBook a lot is I've had to plug in this USB dongle keyboard. This is the dongle to a keyboard. I plug that into my USB-A. So that way I can actually put this MacBook under my desk, have it plugged into this monitor. That's actually how you've mostly seen my desk setup. It's mostly this monitor pulled out with something displaying on it. I control it via a keyboard, and this is the thing I use. However, whenever I go to make a drive video afterwards, I do my scripting on this because it's way too cold in here to be scripting on this. Although, I guess there is one benefit to having Intel. Intel, thank you for making these very terribly inefficient CPUs, because they are really helping they are actually helping keeping this room warm. Not by much, actually, unfortunately. Did that logo just shift again? Alright, so here comes the actual problem. Whenever I actually go to port my pages document over to here, I plug in my flash drive and here comes a problem. The USB ports are so close to each other, and this flash drive here is so thick because, of course, if you're going to have a retractable port on here, well, you got to have housing around the sides of it as well. There's no room to plug in both of these. It works fine for most USB cables out there, but if you have USB cables with the thicker ends on the side or trying to do flash drives, you can only plug in one at a time. So you're basically using only one USB port at a time. Not cool. I do not understand how Apple's messed up this placement so bad. These ports are way too close to each other. This is horrible design. Thank goodness the Retina MacBook Pros actually fixed this by putting the second USB port on the other side of the laptop, and USB-C makes things much better too. But still, these ports are way too close to each other to plug in multiple things at a time. Instead of having two USB ports at my disposal, I pretty much only have one. SD card reader was only useful for me when I was daily driving my Samsung, because the way I got footage off of it was I took the micro SD card out of it, put it in my SD adapter, and plugged it in my MacBook because, yeah, macOS does not play nicely with Android. But after I switched to iPhone and pretty much got rid of all my Samsung stuff, yep, SD card has now been useless for me. I can do without the slot. And by the way, this thing also doesn't have the slot either. The headphone jack is still useful, and I know Taylosive back in the day when he got his 15-inch 2016 MacBook Pro, he used to say that the headphone jack and that should not be there. It really should. Honestly, on professional systems, the headphone jack actually should be there. Now, yeah, it's not as good if you're an audiophile with actual professional DAC and such and all that. Yeah, it might not be that useful, but still, having the headphone jack on a professional laptop is really useful. And you know why? It's because whenever you're doing anything that involves editing audio, some can do it with AirPods, but they are not professionals. I'm telling you that much. You need a direct physical connection. There's just no way around that. You need a physical connection if you're going to be editing audio. So I still use the headphone jack on that. I don't use it on my phone because my phone doesn't have one. But even when I had my Samsung A50, I never used it either. But on a laptop, and thank goodness there aren't any laptops that have gotten rid of it yet, the headphone jack is useful. Another feature that I actually like about it that I'm going to miss a lot is the battery LED indicator lights. They're on the side of it. There's actually a button you can push, and there's a total of 8 LEDs that will light up depending on what your battery percentage is. It's really nice. I actually liked it. Oh, and the best part, it actually works when the entire system is powered off. No, not the battery when the battery's dead. When the battery's dead, then well, the lights won't turn on because there's nothing to power them. But even when the system is shut down, even when it's not in sleep mode, it is fully shut down. That still works. It's a nice way to check your battery. I actually like that. I'm not gonna lie, no problems there, no complaints there. And then on the other side, we have the CD drive. I thought it was pretty cool at first, but when I discovered how much I use CDs, how many people actually use CDs today, it quickly became very useless and irrelevant. And that's actually what generated a lot of other problems that are related to this design. And it's because it's all focused on trying to include a CD drive as well. I absolutely hate the form factor of this, and it's not because its area has nothing to do with it. The amount of space it actually takes up on a table is not that bad because obviously it's a smaller laptop. It's a 13-inch instead of a 15-inch. Here's where the CD drive actually comes into play, and it ruins a lot of these things for me. It is very thick. It is so thick. It is by far the thickest laptop actually in this house right now. And having that thickness actually makes it slightly more difficult for me to grip. I don't know why, but that's just the case for me. But that's not even the worst part. Having this thick of a laptop actually means it's also really heavy. This thing is heavier than a Retina 15-inch. This is just a 13-inch MacBook Pro here, and yet this thing is heavier than a 2013 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro. Why? CD drive. That's pretty much why. It's that thick and heavy because of the CD drive. There's other things that I don't like about it too. Of course, there's a lot more things I don't like about it, and a lot of those things involve the trackpad. I do not like the trackpad at all. I am not a trackpad person in general. I mean, it's kind of funny because I use a mouse with a built-in trackpad, but this trackpad is actually good. And most of my complaints about the trackpad actually don't involve scrolling the cursor around. My issue with the trackpad is just clicking it. It's a diving board design, which means you can only click at it from the bottom. Top corners, nope, you can't click it there. You still need to have one of the newer MacBooks to do it. I'm not going to complain about the size because it's actually fairly sized compared to the space that it was given with. I am so surprised that they used this exact same trackpad on the larger MacBook models, but at least on the 13-inch, it's decently sized for the space that they were given. Though I will say, they did manage to somehow increase trackpad size on newer 13-inch models. But my biggest issue, it doesn't involve actually scrolling the cursor around. My issue is just the clicking of it. I do not like clicking that trackpad. I do like clicking this mouse though. This mouse is much better. That's why I'm more of a mouse person than a trackpad person. The function keys, and unfortunately the MacBook I'll be upgrading to actually does not actually have the replacement to function keys either. But even still, these function keys are pretty useless. 70% of them have gone completely unused. I'm serious. I've only used 30% of the keys on this thing. 30% of its functions. What have I used on it? F1 and F2, the brightness keys, F10 through F12, the volume keys. Every now and then, like once a month, I touch the keyboard brightness keys, but you wanna know how frequent that is? Give you a hint, not that frequent. And in terms of using like F1, F2, F3, F4, that sort of stuff, how a lot of other function keys work, I only use 2. That's it. Just 2. For the most part, the majority of the function keys on this is useless, even when it comes to just using the regular MacBook controls. I use less than 50% of them. Less than 50%. Yeah, these function keys are useless. These also have very terrible speakers, and I mean, even compared to so many other Apple products, like this thing is older, but it has a much better set of speakers compared to this. Now, I don't know if they're broken or they're that bad or such, or if it's because they don't actually have dedicated speaker holes like so many other Macs have. The speakers on this sound terrible, and you can definitely tell if you watch the Everything Apple race that Salt Pepper and I did. We played videos and an audio message. Not only was his 15-inch louder, but it sounded way better. So much better. It just made this thing sound like trash, and you know what? I'm sorry, this thing still sounds really bad. I mean, if you're listening to podcasts and such, then okay, you're listening to people talk, you don't exactly care about sound quality of that. But when you're listening to music, oh, they're so bad. bad. So yeah, speakers in this, also not good. But the webcam and microphone are also pretty bad in this as well. They say it's a 720p webcam. I'm sorry, it is not 720p. It's gotta be like a 480p webcam or something, because it is not 720p quality. It is so terrible. I don't know why they call it 720p, because that camera is not 720p. And also the microphones on it, they're not that good. I have actually tried doing an actual recording on the MacBook before, and the microphones don't sound great. They're not good at all. That's a lot of features that I've listed, and you can definitely tell why I'm a bit frustrated with a lot of this. The display, not the best I/O selection, but also the two most used ports that I actually use, the USB ports, they're too close together, so that way I can't actually plug in two things at the same time. There's also this giant slot that makes water resistance, or, well, then again, laptops in general aren't water resistant, but it's not. I still got a lot of useless holes in here. The laptop is thick and heavy, function keys are useless, trackpad is not my favorite design. There's so much that I hate about this. We gotta talk about the internals as well, because even those aren't great. Now, I know you're going to say, but Alpha, this is the unibody MacBook Pro, which means you can upgrade all of the internals to make it better. You can swap out that crappy hard drive for an SSD. You can put in more memory in this thing. Why? And even if I did, this thing still has limited compatibility with a lot of things. If I recall, the maximum memory that this MacBook supports is up to 8 gigs. The maximum memory that this iMac supports is also up to 8 gigs. It is currently maxed out in terms of memory I can put in it. If I try to install 16 gigs in this, it will not work. Same thing goes for this. It's currently at 4 gigs right now, and I could up it to 8, but here's another thing. I have to basically spend more money to upgrade these internals, and I still have to put up with the fact that I have a crappy display, and no, the display is not broken. This display is actually in perfect condition. It is not broken. There's not a single dead pixel on it. It's just bad, and it's not even broken. So I still have to put up with a bad display. I still have to put up with these two USB ports that are way too close to each other. I still have to put up with the fact that there are more useless holes in it. I still have to put up with the fact that it's heavy and thick and all that. What good will the upgrading the internals to actually make the performance usable do if I still have so many other issues with the rest of this laptop? But anywho, yeah, in terms of the internals, I mean, I talked about the speakers and the microphones already, but there's a few other things in it that are actually pretty bad. The wireless card. I mean, Wi-Fi, I don't actually have any complaints about Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is okay. I mean, yeah, I don't have the fastest Wi-Fi here in general, but Wi-Fi is okay. Wi-Fi is okay. It's Bluetooth that is not. This mouse right here, you see this mouse? I cannot connect this Bluetooth mouse to this MacBook. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because it's using like Bluetooth 2.0. Same thing originally with this. I've upgraded the wireless card in this, so that way I actually can use this mouse and a Mac keyboard. When I got the iMac originally, I had a Windows keyboard to go with it. But now I got a Mac-specific Bluetooth keyboard. I could technically upgrade the wireless in here to get myself a better Bluetooth card. Oh, except slight problem. It's a proprietary card. In the iMac, the wireless card actually uses mini PCIe, which is, believe it or not, actually a fairly common port on motherboards. Mini PCIe, that's how I did it. On this MacBook here, there's no mini PCIe ports, and I've torn this thing apart to actually check real quick. No, there is no mini PCIe port. And when I actually looked at the wireless card itself, it's proprietary. And the new one that I would have to put in there, A, it won't fit, even though this thing's a chunk boy. There should be enough room to fit it in there. It's not gonna fit, and there's no way to connect it because they changed the standards. Bluetooth! I still have to deal with a crappy version of Bluetooth that doesn't connect to most peripherals out there. I'm surprised my Magic Mouse here connected to it. The thermals in this thing are also ridiculous. I mean, you pro users who bought the 2016 or through 2019 15-inch MacBook Pros, you think your laptops suck because of thermals? This thing is much worse. This thing will climb to absolute ridiculous temperatures, and even though it should theoretically have a better cooling system because it's thicker, there's more room for air to flow through, and because of that thicker chassis design, there should be a lot more room for heat to dissipate into the actual architecture of it. Oh, no, there is not. This thing still gets ridiculously hot. I've actually burned myself with it one time. This thing, I've said it before, this thing could potentially start a house fire. It's dangerous. I don't know why I still export videos videos on this thing. Oh, that's because they take way too freaking long to do it on this one here. But the thermals on this thing, they're so bad. They're so out of control. Even worse than the newer 15-inch MacBook Pros. Oh, so bad. Yeah, and then the last thing, as a result of having higher power consumption, because I've got my brightness on my display turned up so bright because I can't see it, Intel chips aren't efficient. Yeah, I guess at the time Apple just transitioned to Intel, so okay, but still, very inefficient Intel processors, and that's just because this thing is old. Terrible thermals, so it's also throttling, and the battery life on this is atrociously bad. I checked the cycle count, and it doesn't seem like it's even worth upgrading the battery. If I do, for the most part, scripting and basic web browsing, I can actually get about 4 to 6 hours off of it, which isn't too bad for most laptops. But the second I open iMovie or GarageBand, or I'm doing heavy web browsing, like I have multiple Safari tabs open, it starts drawing a lot more power than I would think even is a little bit unreasonable. When I actually start editing on this, I have 1.5 hours away from an outlet if I am editing on this. 1.5 hours. I have 1.5 hours, and usually what I can do in that time is actually cut up my A-roll. Just cutting it up. That's all I can do with the battery life this thing gives me, and it sucks. Okay, so yeah, those are all the hardware features of it. Let's actually talk about some software features real quick, because there are some software features that are not working because this is an older computer. The first one, AirDrop. This thing technically has it, and if you look in the Finder window, there is a tab for AirDrop. However, evidently there are two different versions of AirDrop, AirDrop 1 and AirDrop 2. You are most familiar with AirDrop 2 because that's what our iPhones use, that's what our iPads use, that's what our latest Mac devices use. Those all use AirDrop 2. I've even upgraded my iMac so that way I could use AirDrop 2. But what does this thing use? It uses AirDrop 1. And you want to know what Apple products are compatible with AirDrop 1? Older Macs that only use AirDrop 1. I'm dead serious. I cannot use a legacy version of AirDrop to actually AirDrop files between computers or devices. My iPhone, all of my Apple devices, they cannot find this MacBook. And this MacBook can't even find any other Apple devices. It can't even find my iMac, for crying out loud. And that's due to, and the reason why this is an issue is because this is a hardware problem. If I could upgrade the Bluetooth in it so I can actually get AirDrop 2 support on this, wow, I wouldn't have this issue. But once again, a software feature is not working because of this old hardware. There's also no software support for this anymore. I am stuck on macOS High Sierra, and as a YouTube channel that likes to cover a lot of the latest tech out there, at least that's what I really want to do, not being able to run the latest versions of software is a bit of a problem. And not only does not having the latest version of macOS, not only is that an issue, app support as well. I am running older versions of mostly all of these apps. iMovie, I am running an older version of. I'm also running an older version of Pages, and it's actually a problem for me because when I'm doing collaboration documents, like for example, my book, I'm sharing my book with a few other people to help me edit out mistakes. But when I've shared that book, the second I add it to iCloud and say, hey, let's collaborate with this on a project, whenever I go to try to edit it on Pages on this thing, I keep getting this pop-up that says, you cannot edit this document because please update Pages. But I can't update Pages because I'm not running the latest version of macOS. So frustrating. So now whenever I want to edit my book on this thing, I have to go to the web and log in and do all that stuff versus just open Pages and poof, my book's right there. And then a bit of an obvious one. I mean, this is just fact. macOS for the most part runs just fine, and for the most part more stable than Windows ever could on any piece of hardware. This is still running on an old computer, which means it's just not going to be fast. It's not going to be very fast and snappy. Now I will say this is better than using Windows 10, and if I did use Windows 10 on this, it would probably lag much worse and crash more often than macOS does on this. This is something that I've noticed. macOS runs much better on older hardware than Windows could on old hardware. Kind of funny, but it's true. And the reason why I'm not complaining about macOS is because A, I've actually seen it run on decent hardware before. I have Salt's old 15-inch MacBook Pro. It ran really well on that thing. macOS ran really well on that thing. We've only been able to, I mean, every now and then we trigger the beach ball of death, but it's very rare whenever we do it. Oh, and I don't, when I've used it at least, I haven't seen a single app crash. I have no idea if he's had an app crash on it before. Yeah. So considering how well it ran on that, and obviously we're in 2021 with the new super performing M1 Pro and M1 Max, I can't wait to see how macOS performs on that. And unfortunately, I know Windows never could perform as well as macOS. This is why I have no frustrations with the software. All of my frustrations with this device is all hardware related. related. And even though there are some software things not working, the reason why they are not working is because of the hardware on this. Hardware features, hardware support, such and such and such. So yeah, there's a lot I have to complain about this. And you guess there's all a theme to all of this. It's just because this is an old device. This, back in the day, this was a pretty good laptop. This was a pretty good computer. But obviously, we are 10 years past that. Whew, has tech really improved from then? So, and not only has tech improved, our standards have also improved. So now, this is no longer works. It no longer meets my standards of being a good laptop anymore, which is why I have so many frustrations with it. I'm sure if I bought this thing back in 2011, I would be pretty happy with most of the stuff because A, well, most displays weren't exactly better than this. I'd still have my complaints about it being small, but it not being bright enough or the resolution and such, I probably wouldn't have those complaints because back then displays weren't that bright or had that good a resolution. The I/O, having a lot of I/O back then was viewed as an advantage, and I probably would have thought the same, especially back in 2011. Trackpad, I probably would have thought that was the best trackpad either because so many laptops still actually cannot make a decent trackpad. Function keys, we all know that function keys suck on pretty much all laptops. Most of them we can't find uses for. If I used this in 2011, I probably would have been happy using this thing with the exception of I still can't plug in flash drives and such because seriously, Apple, that was so dumb. Why did you put those USB ports that close together? And then the display size. Those could have been my only two complaints because other than that, all the other issues I have with this, they're just all related to this being an old laptop. And so evidently my standards have improved to the point where this is too old for me to use and I need something better. Alright, but that's not even the rest of the things I have to talk about. So, because yes, I mentioned I actually got scammed on Amazon. Here's what happened. So I originally had a budget of $400 and I was desperately trying to get away from Windows because you can take a look at this 35-minute video of ranting on Windows here. And because Windows 7 was losing support and I've already had to deal with XP losing support before and that was not fun. XP not having support, that was not fun at all. And because I didn't want to deal with that on Windows 7, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to switch to Mac OS with whatever laptop I can get my hands on. So I originally had a budget of $400, looked on Amazon, and I found this 13-inch 2013 Retina MacBook Pro. And honestly, it looked pretty good. It had 500 gigs of storage as advertised, 4 gigs of RAM. I have no idea if they had upgraded it to 8 yet, but oh well, yeah. The specs on this, they actually match Core i5, 4 gigs of RAM, 500 gigs of storage. Those details were correct. However, everything else they talked about on that Amazon page was a complete lie and misleading false advertising because they advertised me. This was even in the description on this listing. 2013 Retina MacBook Pro 13-inch features Retina display. This thing obviously doesn't have a Retina display. When I paid that $400 for that, it was actually about like $430 or something. When I paid that $430 for that MacBook, I was expecting to get a thin and light 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro. Instead, I got this hunk of junk in the box. I was really upset to see that Amazon shafted me like that because they show me pictures, all those pictures, 13-inch Retina. It was a 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro. Every single picture, all of the descriptions and details and all of that. The year even, I checked the year to be specific and they advertised 2013. Apple discontinued the unibody in 2012. So there's no way I should have gotten this thing. They lied. Instead, they sent me a computer that's 2 years older, has worse software support than that 2013 MacBook. I would have had Catalina installed on that if I could. I could have used Catalina and Big Sur if I wanted to, but no. Instead, I got this. So I am so mad about what Amazon did, but why did I not return this then? Because I could have returned it. It's because I did not want to use Windows anymore. I was so tired and frustrated of already using it, and I just decided, you know what? I'm gonna try to make this work, and for the most part, hey, I've made it 2 years. This thing is still working, actually, to my surprise. The only thing I've had to replace on it was just the charging cable. In that 2 years, despite that it has all of these software issues, all due to the fact that this is an old computer, it still works, but I am still mad that Amazon scammed me like that, and I probably should have sued them for false advertising. So I know that there's a community out there who loves the unibody MacBook Pro, and it's because of its upgradability, and I can see why. I'm a fan of upgradability as well, except not exactly to the extent that you guys are. I am aware aware, you can upgrade the RAM and the storage. You can swap out the hard drive for an SSD, make it more usable. I am totally aware of that. However, as I've modified this iMac here, I discovered that I'm just not into really janky setuping my stuff. And I mean, this is even the case in general. I don't like adding things that originally weren't designed to products. And it's because that could possibly mean, well, optimization issues. Optimization is important. I don't know why there are people out there who think it doesn't matter. Optimization is important. I don't know why it took Pixel so long to figure that out. Finally, Google Pixel has actually optimized their phone for once. But optimization is important. And when you're trying to basically mesh two things that originally weren't designed to work together, optimization is much harder. This is probably another reason why Windows sucks in general, because it has to optimize itself for all sorts of different configurations to run on old crappy systems to these new bleeding edge high-end high performance systems. I'm just not into making janky setups, and that's essentially what I did with this. I've jankified this setup so much, I actually had to add a switch whenever I power this on. Whenever I power this on, I have to physically hardwire disconnect the Bluetooth module in this just so it turns on. That is what happened when I jankified this thing. I had to have this switch here at the bottom every single time I want to turn this on. I'm not into doing this anymore. I thought it was cool at first, but after I've seen what it does to these Macs especially, but even other computers in general, it screws so many things up. And when it comes to products that I use for work, I can't afford to have my time being wasted because things are not optimized properly. I cannot do this anymore, even if I could fix these issues. The problem is this is still an old laptop. I'm not getting away from the biggest problem I have with this. I mean, the display, I act like the display is my biggest problem on this, and hardware things on this, yes, the display is the biggest. But to sum it up, this laptop is so old, I don't see the point in just trying to keep breathing life into it. So pretty much to sum up this entire review, please don't buy this. This is not worth it anymore. It was great in 2011, but we are 10 years past 2011 now, and we have had much better stuff come out ever since. Do not buy this laptop. Don't. It's not worth it. Even for upgradability. I know we're going to have to kiss that goodbye with Macs because, well, Apple has shown us optimization is much better than trying to make everything user replaceable, than trying to make everything hot swappable and such. We've had that era. It was cool, but in an age where we're constantly trying to make things perform better, evidently this modularity is not helping. The modularity aspects are actually making these bad products. I can't recommend this laptop anymore. I just can't. If you're going to use this for work, don't even bother. I guess my only reason why you might want to keep this is just collector's items, or you like modifying and tinkering with stuff. But honestly, if you're looking for a computer to do actual work on, like I do, don't get this. It is that bad. Please don't buy this laptop. Okay, why have I taken this long to do this review? It's because I've actually wanted to time it to actually make this announcement. Guys, the purchase has been done. I have spent too many years scrapping and saving for this new 16-inch MacBook Pro that has come out. And finally, after months of saving and months of banging my head on the wall, being impatient, because I am not a very patient person, I did it. I made the purchase. The MacBook Pro has been ordered and it's on its way. Should take about a month. I mean, according to Apple's estimated delivery, should take about a month. But then again, that's emphasis on the word should. In terms of the configuration I ordered, it is the base model, but with upgraded storage. That's what I ordered. Oh, and it's in silver, of course, because I'm not a fan of the space gray shade. So obviously I got it in silver. I don't think enough people actually appreciate the silver color. So I'm going to appreciate the silver color for those who don't. I'm so excited. I really am. I can't believe I actually dropped about $2,500 on a computer. This is the most expensive thing I've ever purchased, so I can't wait for next month. And I'm going to give you the best coverage I can on this thing possible. Once again, thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for watching. Do me a favor and interact with the stuff below. My name is Alpha DeWolf, Random Alpha, signing out.